Hi there! Corporation kicks off the update with Alva, the new core support for the freeze element. Her kit brings both AoE and single target damage, strong amplification, and freeze team staples like interceptions and shielding. Rebella has been waiting for her arrival for the past 2 months, and honestly, she should be grateful we're not getting another early burn unit instead. If you've forgotten how Rebella plays by now, feel free to revisit her video. Jokes aside, Alva demands your full attention. Her mechanics can feel a bit overwhelming at first, so please bear with me as we break down her kit step by step. Without further ado, let's get into it. Alva starts the battle by using her S2. The skill consumes her entire Confectance index to deal up to 90% of her attack as freeze damage in a 4-tile AoE around the selected position. She needs to have only one Confectance point to use her S2, but the skill consumes all available points and scales its multiplier and stability damage accordingly, 15% attack and 1 stability damage per point. It summons an ice spike at the target location for 3 rounds called Liquid Nitrogen Fang. As the Allen Fang appears, all targets in range are afflicted with the debuff Hypothermia, which increases their freeze damage taken by 20%. Then, any actively attacked target within the Fang's range has a portion of its HP converted into Hoarfrost, a special shield that is consumed only after other shield effects. The HP conversion is equivalent to 500% of Alva's attack and can occur once per enemy per round. Now you might wonder, what's the point of shielding the enemy? First, keep in mind that this shield is converted from the opponent's HP and in no way additive to its HP pool, so Alva is not trying to sabotage your Gunsmoke score. Instead, she provides bonus damage against shielded opponents. Also remember that Rebella's 4th fix key provides bonus damage and pierce rate against shields, clearly designed for this very moment. Moreover, when an opponent's shield breaks within Alva's range, she will follow up with an attack dealing damage equal to 40% of the shield's HP. In the case of Hoarfrost, this would be equivalent to 200% of Alva's attack. Then, when Hoarfrost breaks, it applies Frostbite to the enemy, which adds another 20% freeze vulnerability. Together with Hypothermia, that's 40% increased damage taken. Due to these effects, it is your priority to maintain the Allen Fang throughout the battle. You will also notice that frost tiles spawned around the Fang's location. This is due to Alva's first fix key that creates the tiles whenever Hoarfrost is applied. Remember that this occurs once per round before anyone on the team actively attacks a target within the Fang's range. Now at this point, there's a noteworthy difference between a V0 and a V1 Alva. In this example she is V2, so following her S2, she enters Covering Mode, here translated as Support Mode. Covering Mode provides a lot of benefits and Alva is able to maintain it permanently, though her method of achieving it differs at V0. Covering Mode increases her personal crit rate by 20% and boosts the team's freeze damage against shielded opponents by 20%. This is the aforementioned bonus that synergizes with the application of the Hoarfrost barrier. Finally, she gains the ability to intercept active enemy attacks within her range, dealing 60% of her attack as freeze damage and converting 20% of the damage into Brumal Barrier for all allies. This is another type of shield which we'll explore once we get to her interceptions. As I've warned you, she has an exorbitant number of mechanics packed into her kit, and it's not going to get easier. As noted, she enters Covering Mode following her S2 if she's at least V1 and only when she has 3 stacks of battle prep. Going back to the beginning of the turn, you can see that she started with 3 stacks of the buff due to her second fix key. This grants her both bonus Confectance points and 3 stacks. Battle Prep doesn't have an effect of its own and simply serves as a counter. Normally, she gains 1 stack after ending her action, so without the key she would not immediately gain Covering Mode following her S2. Returning to where we were. If available, her S2 consumes 3 stacks of Battle Prep to grant extra command. This is independent of the V1 effect that additionally grants Covering Mode. Since Alva gains 1 stack of Battle Prep after ending her turns, she gains extra command every 3 rounds. With her first fix key equipped, she can perform 2 actions on turn 1, 4, 7 and so on. Note that even though the skill just consumed her Confectance index, Alva is fully recharged. This is again due to her V1 upgrade, allowing her another use of the S2 with a fully stacked multiplier of 120% of her attack. In a single target situation, she'd use her ultimate instead, which also increases its multiplier according to the Confectance points consumed, but more on that later. As Alva concludes her action, you can see her passive activate, restoring 3 Confectance points and 1 stack of Battle Prep, here translated as Combat Ready. It will take another 2 rounds for her to regain the stacks to activate another extra command. It's worth noting that only one Allen Fang can exist on the field. As you can see, the first summon disappeared after she cast the skill a second time. Before moving on, let's watch the alternative reality in which you've decided to stay free to play instead of spending on your favorite gacha game. At V0, Alva will again start by using her S2 with 3 stacks of battle prep due to her fix key. This summons the Allen Fang and grants extra command, just as before, albeit with a 30% lower multiplier. The main difference is that she did not gain covering mode, nor did her Confectance Index recharge. Since both her S2 and Ultimate require at least one Confectance point, she will now have to use her S1. This is a single target attack dealing 100% of her attack as freeze damage. Crucially, she gains covering mode for 3 turns before the attack. The duration of the buff decreases at the end of the round, and her S1 has 2 rounds downtime, so as noted before, she can maintain covering mode permanently even at V0, just with less AoE power. After her turn concludes, she recharges 3 Confectance points and 1 stack of battle prep, so everything stays the same. On the enemy's turn, Alva launches her first Interception. Remember that this is tied to the activation of covering mode, and there's no downtime to the state. A portion of the dealt damage is converted to a shield for the team, 20% below V4 or 30% after. This Brumal Barrier is capped at 200% of Alva's initial attack or 300% at V6, so building attack on her is your main priority to increase both her damage and shielding. While having Brumal Barrier, a character enjoys 1.5% bonus damage per 1000 HP shield, plus a crit damage bonus depending on Alva's dupes. As you can see here, the 16k damage translates to a roughly 3k HP shield. That should illustrate that her ability to sustain and to amplify are diminished against targets with high damage reduction. Note though that Alva's passive automatically converts other shields to Brumal Barriers, so someone like Suomi can help her out. Alva also passively boosts the strength of shields generated by the team by 30%. After Interception, Alva restores 1 Confectance point. Remember that she restored 3 points after ending her turn. If she manages to intercept 3 attacks per round, she is able to repeatedly cycle her Confectance Index. Now let's zoom in on the next target that Alva intercepts to observe more closely what happens as Alva's pseudo shield breaks. Remember that her Allen Fang converted a portion of the enemy's HP into this Hoarfrost barrier. Following Alva's interception, it is Robella's enhanced unity damage that breaks Hoarfrost. Immediately after, Alva launches her attack, dealing damage equal to 40% of the shield's HP value, here amounting to about 50k damage including a critical hit. The target is also affected by Frostbite, stacking more freeze vulnerability against it. Tallying up the total damage from Alva's 3 interceptions this round, she dealt about 54k damage, amounting to a shield of about 11k HP. That is pretty much close to the limit given the scaling based on her initial attack. The opponents chip away at the shield, so let's say the team carries a 10k HP Brumal Barrier as the round ends. That equates to a team-wide 15% damage bonus, plus 15% or 30% bonus crit damage at V3 or V6 respectively. Jumping ahead to the final round of the battle, because Alva prioritizes her S2 so long as there are multiple targets to deal with. With only the boss left, Alva shifts to dealing single target damage, which her ultimate does most effectively. It works the same way as her S2 in that it requires 1 Confectance point to activate, but consumes her entire index for increasing skill and stability damage. The total damage is essentially double that of her S2, up to 180% of Alva's attack at V0 or 240% at V2 and above. As mentioned before, the Alva in this showcase is V2. Before the footage continues, take note of Robella's Confectance Index. She is currently at 3 points because she used her ultimate in the previous round. After Alva fires her shot with a multiplier of 240% for a total of 160k damage, Robella restores 1 Confectance point. With her V2 upgrade, Alva doesn't just get a higher multiplier, but also recharges 1 point for all freeze characters on the team, excluding Alva herself. As you can see, she is still at 3 points that were restored by her passive after ending her turn. This effect is the reason why Alva's V2 is considered a reasonable breakpoint for her role in supporting Robella, who suffers from an excruciatingly slow Confectance regeneration. I believe that falls under the classic create a problem, sell the solution concept. So now that you've seen all of Alva's kit, let's put everything together. Her playstyle is actually quite simple, despite her complicated mechanics. There are 2 key elements you have to be mindful of: her liquid nitrogen fang and covering mode. Both last for 3 rounds, so on turn 1, 4, 7 and so on, you have to refresh their duration. At V0, you do this by starting these turns with her S2 to summon the Fang, which grants extra command every 3 rounds, followed by her S1 to activate covering mode. What you do in between depends on the stage. In situations where you can target multiple enemies at once, you'd prioritize her as 2, otherwise her ultimate. In normal map content where you move around, you may have to use her as 2 more often regardless of the number of targets to reposition the Allen Fang, since many of Alva's mechanics depend on its proximity to the opponent. With her V1 upgrade, you no longer need to use her as 1, since covering mode now gets activated by her as 2 every 3 rounds. That way, you still have to use her as 2 on turn 1, 4, 7, etc., but the other actions simply depend on the aforementioned considerations. Keep in mind that Alva's personal damage and amplification depend on her interceptions, so in mobbing stages you want to position her close to the action. As for the action order of the freeze team, you typically have Alva go before the damage dealers like Robella or Macchiato, though Robella sometimes acts first when she needs to use her as 2 to reapply Radiant Rise. As you can see from the stats overview of this showcase, Alva contributed a respectable amount of damage for a support character. Her expected damage is about 20% lower at V0, but that still makes her output more relevant than most other lower invested supports. That brings us to Alva's investment breakpoints. Here's her power progression chart. You're already familiar with her functionally most relevant upgrade when it comes to her supporting role, which is her V2 for the bonus Confectance point for freeze allies. As mentioned before, her V3 and V6 both add crit damage bonuses based on the value of Alva's Brumal Barrier, and starting from V4, her ability to sustain the team becomes better by improving her shielding capability. As for her personal damage, you're only seeing significant changes at V5 and V6. It may not look like much when you're used to seeing power spikes of 300% and more, but keep in mind that Alva's baseline performance is quite strong. As a reference, her V6 output is comparable to that of a V6 Springfield. Now, Alva's personal damage is one thing, but we also have damage calculations for Alva's impact on Robella's damage output at various investment breakpoints. In this graph, the 100% baseline is Robella's personal damage at V6. Having a V0 Alva along for the ride increases Robella's output by 25%. Adding Alva's signature weapon provides a further increase of 11%. The V2 requires 2 more dupes and only adds as much value as a signature weapon, providing a boost of about 10%, thereby halving the cost effectiveness as compared to the weapon. You can hopefully appreciate the diminishing returns. This may be counterintuitive because Robella gets to use her ultimate more often, which is the biggest nuke in her kit. However, every use of the ultimate means 1 less basic attack and consequently less sense weakness stacks, thereby lowering the ultimate's multiplier. The V3 is included in the calculation because it adds 1% bonus crit damage per 1000 HP shield, but at this point Alva's shielding is too weak to benefit meaningfully from the effect. At full investment, Alva boosts Robella's damage by 82% as compared to baseline, or by 31% relative to her V3. Similarly to her personal damage output, the most significant improvements come with the final upgrades. Given Alva's impressive V0 performance and significant boost to Robella's damage even then, I suggest no further investment unless you're going all the way with the intention of running a freeze core with both a V6 Alva and a V6 Robella. That said, Alva's signature weapon is a worthy and manageable investment if you plan to use the freeze core regularly. It boosts the crit damage of the team's freeze attacks by 10%, up to 20%, and grants another 10% up to 20% damage bonus when allies have shields. There aren't many support weapons that offer this much value, though it's partly tied to her element. As alternatives, you can use Gold Melody or Planeta. Gold Melody is often recommended due to its attack bonus, which is better for Alva's supporting role. Planeta's crit damage substat favors Alva's personal damage, improving it by about 5% at the cost of lower shield values. Despite the new attachment sets, there's nothing out of the ordinary here. Use Phase Strike for efficiency or invest in a freeze boost set for minor gains. You want to build as much attack as you can with crit as a second priority. Note that Alva benefits from a permanent 20% crit rate bonus via covering mode, so you only need to build crit rate up to 80%. Moving on to Alva's fixed key setup. As you should be aware by now, her second fixed key is mandatory at V0 because the bonus stacks of battle prep allow you to use the S2 and S1 at the start of battle. This creates a liquid nitrogen fang and activates covering mode. At V1 and above, this is not absolutely necessary because you achieve both with just her S2, but you will still want it for the turn 1 double action and the synergy with her fourth key. That said, her fourth key is another must-have, granting Alva 3% bonus attack for each consumed stack of battle prep, up to 18% at most. Remember that Alva's S2 consumes 3 stacks for the activation of extra command. That means she gains 9% attack on turn 1, assuming you have a second key equipped, plus another 9% on turn 4 for the limit of 18%. The bonus remains in effect for the entire battle. The most common third key option is her sixth key, which increases the stability damage enemies take within the Alan Fang's range by 2. This is mostly relevant for bossing content, since stability shields are often tied to damage reduction effects. Of course, it is also great when mixing the electric and freeze cores. If the enemy is not innately weak to freeze damage and you don't have another tile generator on the lineup, you will have to take Alva's first key instead. As you've seen in this showcase, this key creates frost tiles whenever the Alan Fang applies Hoarfrost to targets in range. You're essentially switching between key 1 and 6 depending on the situation. However, if you bring Jushefnaya or Suomi along, you should leave the tile generation to them. Lastly, her fifth key grants buff removal for her ultimate, allowing her to dispel 2 buffs before skill activation. This is mostly relevant for Gunsmoke or other bossing content. If you have no other source for this effect, Alva can fill that role. Her third key can be ignored as it only reduces the received stability damage by 1 when having Brumal Barrier. In summary, Alva is a new core support of the Freeze element and Robella's favorite partner. Just with her baseline kit, she boasts impressive damage and provides a lot of amplification. For one, she applies up to 40% freeze vulnerability to targets. She also grants a 20% damage bonus against shielded opponents, which she temporarily enforces via her own Hoarfrost mechanic. This also serves to activate Robella's fixed key for even more bonus damage against shields. The Hoarfrost will break quickly when it is the only shield. Then, she creates shields for the team via her interceptions, which further boost the team's damage depending on the shield strength, 1.5% per 1k HP. At V2, she also gains the unique ability to restore 1 Confectance point to freeze allies via her ultimate, which helps Robella and holds potential value for future characters. At full investment, Alva becomes a strong sub-DPS akin to Springfield, while also providing significantly more amplification for Robella or other freeze allies. She also has a bit of utility packed into her fixed keys, allowing her to fill the role of the tile generator or buff remover. On the flip side, her shields are not too reliable at lower investment and likely unable to sustain the team through harder hitting content. It should be enough for Gunsmoke, but you'll lose some of the variable damage bonus when the team takes hits. Since the shield scale of the damage she deals, it will also be diminished against targets with high damage reduction. Notably, she also lacks debuff cleansing in her kit, which can be relevant for Gunsmoke. All that being said, she's more of an amplifier than a sustainer. Then, like most support characters, she is tied to her element, providing mostly free-specific benefits and synergies that rely on shielding. At the very least, she wants Robella by her side. Lastly, like the Hydro team's counter mechanic, interceptions rely on the opponent to play along. Alva needs to intercept enemy attacks to create Brumal Barrier and to restore her Confectance index. While she is still functional without interceptions, both her damage and shielding will suffer significantly when enemies don't attack 3 times per turn. In conclusion, the recommendation for Alva is fairly straightforward. If you obtained Robella or wish to dust off an invested Macchiato, you should get Alva. She has core member status and can help revitalize the Monofreeze team or slot alongside Robella in mixed elemental lineups. She's strong at V0 and doesn't require further investment. If you want to splurge a little, consider her signature weapon. If you're a spender and want to use her and Robella regularly, V6 is worth a consideration. Anything in between is not cost effective, though most of her upgrades provide at least some value, in particular her V2. That brings us to the end of this video. Hopefully, I was able to clearly convey Alva's mechanics despite the many different terms I had to introduce. It's always challenging when major parts of a character's kit operate under the hood, forcing me to explain rather than demonstrate. Don't worry if some of it still feels unclear, her actual gameplay is quite straightforward, so you'll be able to use her effectively either way. And if you decide to dive into the finer details after getting some hands-on experience, this guide will still be here for you. In the meantime, before Voimastina's arrival, I'll be working on an updated CN Meta roadmap, since we've now caught up with the previous one. After that, I'm considering covering current CN releases more consistently, potentially in a shorter preview format. Let me know if that's something you'd be interested in, and feel free to share any suggestions. In any case, thank you so much for watching. See you next time.